Welcome back to Nomad Boat Building. We're building the 2.4 meter project. We're going to continue with our planking. Hang on to your shorts for this one. All right, that'll do for the moment. Okay, so we're just gonna take an angle here. Can't get an exact angle because there's so much twist in this spot, but I can kind of guess at it, I think. So that'll go down there and then wrap around like so, hopefully. There's quite a few spots where, even though you're getting the plank out of the steam box and onto the boat quickly, there's just so many nuanced little shapes that I can't quite get that fastened in place quickly enough to hold it there. So I'm coming back every now and then and using the bending iron to just try and really tweak those shapes in. Even still, I can't get some of them to just sit where I want. It just doesn't want to start to fasten it in. And the hole you drilled just happens to land on a seam or something like that. It just will not go where you want it to go. It's driving me kind of crazy. Something will not let me let it sit right down in there. What is it? What is it? It's like touching in 4 different places and I can't see any of them at the same time. Let's see, look around here now. This is the only stupid drill I can keep close at hand. Every other one I put it down somewhere else every time I'm using it because it's too crowded. Too crowded here. I'm gonna have to resign myself to the fact that this is as good as it's gonna get. Ugh. It's not super critical, I hit that angle. that's as good as that one's gonna get. Just stay where I want you to stay. Okay. I'll say one thing about this guy, it has got a crazy amount of torque. Like way beyond what you'd think it would. No speed, but all torque. Alright, let's see if we can cut something to go in here now. Maybe. Maybe. This joint down here is super ugly and I'm not happy about that. I mean, it's gonna disappear, but makes me worried about the next one, the next course. Although it'll be thinner material, so maybe hopefully I'll be able to do a better job of it. Alright, we'll mop her down into the steam box. Alright, well I finally gotten the planking and the tuck here pretty much taken care of. Right now it's just dry fitted, I still need to glue it. Well, it doesn't really look all that complicated if you look at this little sample plank and how much shape is going on in there. That's a good example of exactly how awkward it was to do this. This is a light piece of planking, but the rest of this basically was kind of this shape, and getting it into that shape was really challenging. Now, part of the problem is yellow cedar is pretty good stuff for steaming. However, at this scale, it actually cools off really quickly, and so there's a small window in which you can actually steam it, get it on the boat, and because it's such an awkward thing I'm trying to do, it's really hard to sort of get any fasteners holding it in place at the moment that you need to do that before it cools off and you lose that pliability, that elasticity that the cedar has. And while you can get it to bend into place, it just pops right back out because you didn't get it there fast enough. Today I'm going to put some epoxy into all these joints. There's one or two that are a little more open than I would like, and that is because of the amount that the yellow cedar has shrunk back as it's dried out overnight. And you wouldn't think on a small piece of material like this you'd get that much wood movement, but certainly did. So I'm going to try and sneak some of those gaps closed a little bit if I can. If I can't, it's not the end of the world, and I'll just use a more structural filler in my epoxy when I go to put this together. But I anticipate that from here on out the planking procedure is going to get a whole lot easier. I'm getting into this is the last Steeler plank we have right here in this portion of the hull, and so from here on out it's just a question of each plank getting trimmed down a little bit. And I haven't decided what method I want to use. Option one is just fitting and fastening planks one at a time as I go. Option two is just laying down every other plank unfitted, and then I come back and I use a router to try and trim away the amount that is overlapping from one plank to the next. So the resulting planks might take a little more effort to fit, but I don't know which one it's really going to be. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of the fit and fasten. I'll see if that feels productive, and if it does, I might just stick with that. Reservation about doing it with the router trick is because there's just enough shape in these planks that I'm afraid that I'm not going to get a router to run very gracefully through the hull here and trim the edges of these back. And of course there's worrying about cutting up all of the plastic here that's preventing us from gluing ourselves down to the mold. So maybe I can do sort of a light pass and then finish up with a utility knife. I'm not too sure. So I don't know exactly what path I'm going to take, but we'll start with what we usually do, which is experiment with a few things and see what works best.
With the glue up done and cured, I can now trim these planks that are overhanging the transom, and this is very satisfying to do. Look at how much copper in these things. That's just a small indication as to how difficult it was to try and plank this area. With these planks trimmed off, it really feels like I'm moving in the right direction. I don't know why. It's a small, insignificant portion of the boat, and yet it just gives me entirely a huge amount of satisfaction to complete this little task.
So one of the things I'm doing is I'm weighing out all of my scraps so that I know exactly how much material goes into the boat. So I'm weighing all of my planks as they go in, and then as I'm removing material, I'm weighing out the waste, and then of course we'll subtract it all at the end just to figure out exactly how heavy that boat is. Once I get done with the planking, it'll give me sort of a baseline as to how much more material I have left that I can put into the hull in order to come out at our sort of target weight.
Now, while adhesive was setting up on the aft portion of the boat, I needed to keep the ball rolling, so I skipped ahead and started laying planks a little bit farther forward, but that meant I left a gap in between the forward section and the aft section. Now I got to fill that gap. I decided to try a technique in which you use a router to cut a hole that matches your plank width, and well, that had some marginal success. I'll explain the router technique in a moment, but in the meantime, let's see how it goes with trying to fit this plank.
And here's the problem. The cedar, it swells up just enough that it wants to spread out and take up too much space. That guy's popping out. Come on, get in there. That's frustrating, because I had it fitting real nice. Which I can do about that. I'm going to back up. No choice but to shave a little width off of this guy. And I'm getting buckling right here where I want the opposite shape. It's frustrating. So, pull that off. Alright, I'm going to steam it a little bit longer. Try this again. It's frustrating, so now it's going to shrink back to be not such a great fit now too. I need a little bit of opposite bend right here, which is part of the problem. It's cupping this way, and I needed to bend that way, and I just want to do both things. So I'm going to show you a technique that I was thinking about using. I decided not to, because frankly, after playing around with it, it's not any faster than what I was already doing. I think on a bigger boat it would make total sense, but on this boat it doesn't really. And so what I've got here is I've got a router set up with a fence, and the distance between the router bit, the outer edge of the router bit, and the edge of the fence is going to be my plank width. The idea is I run the fence against my one plank, and it nibbles away at the other plank and reveals my finished shape. And then in theory, you just drop the next plank in place. However, because of the shape here, I need to steam the plank, and because I need to steam the plank, it causes the plank to expand, and then when I'm trying to get the new plank in, it just doesn't fit properly, and I got to whittle it back until it's too small in order to get it in there. So that really kind of ticks me off, and I don't like it. But I'm stuck with this hole here on this side, so I'll do it anyway. But I'm going to continue with a different method on the rest of the boat. Well, those results are pretty much exactly what I expected the first time. It doesn't work well. There's just so many changing shapes here that the router can't follow it properly. Even the depth that the cutter has to be at has to change along the way. And it's just made a total mess out of this. So I'm going to have to come up with some way of fixing it, probably using a much simpler method.
The allure of power tools is ever present in a workshop. But I think it's important to remind ourselves that things got done quickly and efficiently long before power tools ever came along. And it's important to identify when in your own work you're better off turning to an old school technology than to a modern one. In the case of fixing this mess that was caused by trying to use a power tool in the wrong context, I've turned to an old school technology, which is this Japanese Azubiki saw, and running it along the edge of my plank, the plank that has to fit right in that hole. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's quiet, and it's pleasing to do. And it's what I really should have done right in the first place. But without the experimentation of trying it with the power tool, I never would have identified that this is the more efficient way to go. The road to fine craftsmanship is a difficult one. It's full of hills and valleys. The hills are the challenges that you present yourself, and the valleys are the failures that you find yourself falling into. It's important to get back on the horse and keep trying. Now it's important to identify when it's time to try and push yourself a little harder. And as I get older, I find myself getting a little bit lazy every now and then, and not necessarily working to the standard that I feel that I ought to. To combat that, I've turned to instrument making as a way of trying to push myself a little further. Now I've had my boat building mentors over the years, and they've been very valuable to me. But as I move into this new venture, instrument making, which is really just a hobby for me, I have a different source of inspiration. There's a tradition in Japanese carpentry called stolen lessons, in which the apprentice will sneak into the workshop after hours and have a closer look at what the master was doing to try and emulate what they've done. Currently, the mentors that I'm stealing lessons from are Ferris and Jason Romero. Now in the background, you can hear their music playing. They're musicians who live up in Horsefly, BC, where they also produce some of the world's finest banjos. Now, coincidentally, around this time, Ferris and Jason held a contest in which they wanted someone to produce a music video to help promote their new album. Now, a separate creative pursuit of mine has become making videos. Now, I'm always up for a challenge, and I thought this would be a very interesting challenge, something I've never tried before, and something I never even considered trying. So I went and I entered the contest. I had some old Super 8 footage that was shot by my father-in-law while on a canoe trip from Fort St. John to Inuvik in the mid-1960s. Well, I thought this footage would be a perfect match for Jason and Ferris's music, so I put them together, submitted my entry, and a few weeks later I found out I won. I'm now the proud owner of a beautiful Ferris and Jason Romero gourd banjo. So let's take this video out with a win. This is Roll On My Friend by Jason and Ferris Romero. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
The traveler does wonder how long he will walk. Oh, the bright morning sun shines on his feather bed. The gambler does wonder how long he will wait for the perfect set of shapes and colors in his hand. In his roller, my friend, in his roller, my friend, I return to you once more when your wait is done. The lonely one does wonder how long you will wait. Will the celebration be this time for me and me alone? The good one does settle and feel right home, wherever they may see a way to give and give again. In his roller, my friend, in his roller, my friend, I return to you once more when your wait is done. In his roller, my friend, in his roller, my friend, I return to you once more when your wait is done. I return to you once more when your wait is done.